true. My bonny white-winged dart, be thou my messenger straight to her heart. I will be true to thee, my sweetheart, till I die. I promise thee my own Pi Beta Phi. We did the first and the last verse standing as cheerleaders holding our hands out in an arrow at the basketball game. Now that's ridiculous.
We identified with the school because that's where our connection was, but our parents are the people who were, and grandparents who survived because of the industry that aircraft brought in and the opportunity that aircraft brought in. That was probably much more important to them because they didn't actually go to the school.
I think the Pi Phis helped to open up this little closed place. It was just a little Camelot place, and I think we owe a lot to them.
I'm a 5th, 6th, 7th generation weaver. Our weaving history here is so rich because of the settlement school, the Pi Beta Phi Settlement School.
It's a school of arts and crafts today, but in 1912 it was started as a settlement school for 13 students. And they'd walk, which meant their attendance wasn't always the greatest because many of them walked miles and miles to get here.
They came here in 1912 and started a school, but their purpose was always more than education.
We started as a settlement school in 1912 when the Pi Beta Phi women's fraternity came to Gatlinburg. They had this very philanthropic vision of bringing education to individuals in rural areas, and they decided that Gatlinburg, nestled within the Great Smoky Mountains, was their place to sort of lay down roots and start a school and bring education as well as health care to the people of this community.
When the Pi Phis first came to Gatlinburg, the mountain people were not used to getting something for nothing. So their initial reaction was to tell them to go home. My grandmother had a dream. She saw the fog coming down the creek, and that meant to her that that was the fog of ignorance. If the Pi Phis didn't stay, there would be no education for her children and the other children. And so the people of the community rallied and gave money from $5 to $250 to ensure that the land was bought, because that was what the Pi Phis asked, that they share, that the community share, which I think was fine. One of the people in the town asked them if they were a religious organization, and they said, no, we embrace all religions. When the land was bought, that was the beginning, and I think the community celebrated that, and there was a great camaraderie between the community and the Pi Phis, and I think that continued for a number of years.
Gatlinburg being such an isolated community with only like 10 homes and 2 stores, yet up every watershed, up every little stream or farms, they could impact over 200 families.
When I went to home for Sunday lunch with a friend where there were 9 children, and they had a pump on the back porch, and they had sweet cornbread in the top of a wood stove, and we played in the dirt. They swept the yard, and we played with little broken pieces of glass. That was the plates for our dolls, and I mean, I thought that was special. We had to use our imagination to figure out our play. And I had a horse, and I rode up and down the main street of town, and my friend Aunt Carol and I used to ride our bicycles up into the park, all the way up to the Fighting Creek Gap, and ride down and take a picnic lunch. And another favorite thing to do was to hop rocks, sometimes 2 miles up into the park, and swim in the river. There were no swimming pools in Gatlinburg. We went over from school sometimes and ate lunch at the Mountain View. And dormitory students had cattle and gardens that we walked through on the way over to the Mountain View to have lunch.
This is a path that went by Teacher's Cottage and the other two dormitories. And this was my shortcut home. Not just me, everyone that lived in that area, this was our shortcut home. And we'd walk it at 10 o'clock at night after some program and pitch dark, and we always knew where we were going. This flower bed now was a fish pond when this was my shortcut home from school. That's the only place the boys didn't throw me into.
That's just the way things were. I never thought about it being any different than anywhere else.
They found out very quickly what a rich tradition of arts and crafts existed in this community, because the pupils of the school would bring these handmade items to the teachers as thank you gifts.
Immediately, the students probably brought in some work of their grandmothers or stuff as gifts to the teacher, and the teachers immediately noticed that it was fine work and that it was work that had not been going on in the rest of the country for a while.
The Pi-Phis would come and teach our families that they could make a living on the crafts that they made.
They developed the arts to a larger degree than that they had grown up seeing in their home. And of course, the Pi-Phis hired a woman who was very trained in the arts to come here and help design some of the things they made. Ms. Redding was one of the women I remember, and Mr. Mattel was the person who worked in the shop with the boys. There are others, but those two I remember early on. But I think that was just a part of what, in my opinion, should be part of every school. And the arts, the music and the crafts and arts are an important part of learning math and science, that you're better equipped to learn other things, and they must have had enough wisdom, the people that made those decisions, to recognize that.
I went to settlement school here, and so that was the late 40s, early 50s. And by that time, the county had taken over parts of the school system. Whatever they spent on the rest of the county, high schools and elementary schools, they spent on the reading, writing, arithmetic. But the Pi-Phis still had a director here. They still had dormitories for students that lived too far away. And they paid for the home ec teacher, the art teacher, the music teacher, so many other things. And the teachers usually were straight out of UT or college. Pi-Phis usually, they lived on campus. When school was over, it wasn't over. There was always something going on, whether it was a performance to raise money for the PTA, whether it was whatever. There was always something going on here.
Oh, I loved growing up here, because far as working here, being at school, I like it because we've met so many people. You know, I've got to know people all over the world, made friends. I stayed in a dormitory. I stayed in teachers' dormitory here. They kept boys, that was 63. Kept boys and teachers and girls in the Stewart dormitory. And I stayed there for 4 years, 63 through 66, went to high school. Of course, they fed us over here at Staff House, you know, fed girls, boys, both, you know. But it was really enjoyable, too, doing that, you know, the 4 years I stayed here, because it was very good to us, you know. It's just a good experience, you know. I never had been away from home. That's different for me, being away at something like that, going to high school. But I went 1 year to Pi-Phi High School before they changed and went to GP over here. The other 3 years I finished up over there. So it was interesting. And they asked me, said, would you like to come work with us here? And I said, yes, of course I would. If you give me the same pay I'm making here working construction, I'd just love to. So that was about 1970, so I've been here ever since then, so I've enjoyed it, though. It's been great.
But I later realized I had a prep school education without being aware of it. I thought everyone had that kind of education.
Well, we knew, at least I was aware myself, of what we had. Because, you know, we were friends with a lot of the Sevierville people, and we knew they didn't have all these music and crafts and stuff that we did.
Yes, I started there in 1936, I think, and went through 12 years and graduated from high school in 1948 from Pi Beta Phi High School. Even though the county had begun to take over some of the school by the time I got in high school, they still provided art, so I took weaving and other crafts, and they also provided a music teacher. I took voice lessons, and we had a choir, and so the arts were still, and that most of that was provided by the Pi Phis.
I have to say that what the Pi Phis did for me was the education. Particularly, I've spent my life in music. I've been a choir director for over 50 years, and I really think that came from Miss Armstrong.
But we all know that I can.
I bet he lives here. Or did.
I think he might have.
He might have.
Oh, look at him.
Clap, clap, clap. Oh, there
you
goes
Oh,
the
how
day.
he's
Clap,
doing
clap,
the
clap.
do-si-do.
Oh, who is that with the freckles?
That's
Bobby
Bobby.
Carter.
That's Bobby Carter, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And that is Caroline.
Yeah.
And that is
Oh.
Miss Cardwell.
You're right.
I
She
have
really
her.
did like her, did you?
I did like her.
That's a trend.
Oh, that's a Trenum.
Which one? Okay, let's see here. Can't see those people.
That one that's sitting down on the bottom, that looks like Scotty Webb.
Gee.
He's in my class. I do believe that's Scotty.
That's you, Pat.
Oh my
you.
gracious.
It is
I think
you.
I remember that dress.
Oh, who's that little boy right on to the right there?
To me, hearing about the connection of the lady seeing herself, that to me is beautiful. What a great experience. And it's a great connection to the movies, to the past, to Arrowmont's legacy.
I don't think I knew they existed, or I would have been the one crawling up in the attic or somewhere looking for them. No, I did not know of their existence.
The Longbeards and those people must have been born in 1850. Think about that. And they were managed to be captured on moving images. That to me was shocking and a wonderful experience. And to watch the reels unfold, to go through the 1940s into the 60s, you could see all the changes in the people, their clothing, the cars, everything. It was just a great historical document of Arrowmont's past.
You're my pride and my joy, you're my great big baby boy.
I will say this, it's amazing to me how many reels of film come in here that are focused on the Smoky Mountains. Some of the earliest footage that we have was shot in the Smokies by Jim Thompson, Jack Huff. I believe that a lot of that was because of Jim Thompson. He was able to sell movie cameras when they first came to Knoxville to all of his friends. Home movies, to me, are the most valuable of moving images. I see presidents opening up the Smokies, 1940 FDR, visits going down Gay Street. 3 times he came here, and each time was captured on a home movie camera. That kind of footage is not available at any other archive, a national archive, say the Library of Congress or National Archives, but it is here, and it's an invaluable resource for researchers and scholars, historians, students, whomever might be able to use this material. A lot of times we get to it too late. For instance, in the Arrowmont collection, there were some motion picture films that were almost beyond recovery. I do remember that vividly, but somehow we got through it and got them all transferred. It's great to see the color Kodachrome films where just, the children in the dresses and the crafts, everything comes to life in this blazing color that you don't expect to see. It's a great connection to the past, to Arrowmont's legacy. And I believe these films are going to carry on that legacy for generations to come.
She's making him over, she's making him over now.
I was still in high school when they had the first craft workshop where they put beds in our school rooms and for people that came, and tents all across the playground, and had those craft workshops. So to me that seemed very natural at the time.
It was like a living organism. It just continued to grow, and the basic concept, the basic philosophy hasn't changed. It's changed with the times, but what it started out being, it hasn't changed. But it did evolve from producing, which is what the cottage weaving industry was doing. It evolved from producing to teaching, but that was going on side by side in the 1940s. Even, like I said, they had the summer workshops, and that just evolved into Arrowmont.
And to me it was a very natural transition to go into the school, which Arrowmont School of Arts and Crafts, which to me broadened the mission that they had. It was a change in some ways, but what it did, it broadened the experience. It made it available to people not only in this little isolated town, but it made it available, this education called the arts, made it available to people all over the country, and even in foreign countries. It's easy to put your finger on helping a poor child or poor people, but it's harder to me to fill a mission of enriching lives of people who maybe aren't poor, but their lives need enriching, and to make this available to teachers and arts people who then go back and can relate this, it just multiplies. To me, it was an incredible vision, maybe more far-reaching than the first vision of just helping one little town, but any great idea, I think, starts with a small concept and then grows, and to me that's what happened.
They stayed in the dorms. The students came just like they do now from all over the country, different places. They were adults, they were 18 and over. A lot of them were art teachers, a lot of them were professional artists. Even then, the mix was very similar, I think, to what it is today, only, a smaller number. And they were about 6 weeks long. They moved everything out of our high school building and had the classes in there. The weaving was still in the weaving room, but they used the high school building for fiber arts and dyeing and all the other things, and the woodworking was going on. I forget what some of the things were, but I was like under the tables running around. So I was hired to wash dishes for the summer workshops, and the cooks were UT students from the home ec department. And of course, when I wasn't following the teachers around, the art teachers around, I was following the UT students around, asking them questions, them telling me what I needed to go to college,
My mother's sister, Lucille Woodworth, came to Arrowmont as administrator and was also director of the Aerocraft shop during those years that she was there. And she and Marion Hurd became very close friends, and they worked together with Hubert Bebb to build the big main building at Arrowmont to design. And also they came up with the name Arrowmont, and we all talked about it. I can remember that Arrow for the pie fries and Mont for the mountains. And Marion, I took a class at UT from Marion Hurd. I took a refinishing class. She was a very warm and interesting person, and she cared deeply about people, and she really appreciated the beauty of the things that people made. I heard her. And as a teacher, when I took my class, she was very supportive.
Why did the dean want to start a program like that at the University of Tennessee?
Well, that was really an interesting question, because the dean had written a book, Everyday Foods, And so it was accepted by every state in the Union, which meant that she was getting a nice return from this book. And so she was a little bit more affluent than most professors are, and or most deans even, in fact. And so she did quite a lot of traveling, and one of her travels was extensively in the Scandinavian countries. And in the Scandinavian countries, they respect the craftsmen so much, and they do so much to further their crafts and help them out in every way and so forth, and they're so appreciated. In fact, the craftsmen are appreciated as much as the movie stars they used to be. I expect that wouldn't be the situation now. So she thought it was just a shame that here we were living in the Appalachia, and there was so much traditional crafts, because, of course, if they made anything, it was for their use. They weren't making it to sell. I mean, they had to first have, if they had a basket, they had to make the basket. If they had a chair, they had to make a chair, and so forth and so on. So it was wonderfully well built, because they understood the materials and they understood the tools. And so the dean thought it was just a shame that there wasn't any place in the South, in a state college, where crafts are being taught. And she felt that we could, in the school, we could teach, of course, the arts, teach the crafts, but also it would teach appreciation of the work that's being done in the mountains and of the craft work, and that also they would be more apt to have it in their homes and so forth and so on. And then, of course, some other would go on and do the work in the craft field.
In and out the windows, in and out the windows, in and out the windows, as we have done before. Stand and face your lover, stand and face your lover, stand and face your lover, as we have done before. Kneel down beside her, kneel down beside her, kneel down beside her, as we have done before. Follow her to London, follow her to London, follow her to London, as we have done before. I'll tell the Bobby, I'll tell the Bobby, I'll tell the Bobby.
Arrowmont from the beginning, from even the craft workshops, was not therapy. It was not something like YMCA or Senior Center or anything like that teaches. It was never that. It actually supplemented the arts that was taught at the college level. It's just that it was open to everyone. But it was college level summer workshops from the very beginning.
There is a huge artist community here, just you have to find it, And it should be more connected to Arrowmont, and it's kind of surprising that it isn't. Both of my parents are artists, active artists still. They have been, since they were teenagers. So I grew up with a very artistic environment, and even my grandfather was one of the early craftsmen in Gatlinburg. My grandfather, Don Ward, had a shop in Gatlinburg, I think in the 50s and 60s through the 70s, and he was always sort of in cahoots with Arrowmont and the craft that was going on there.
My dad liked people that could do things, because he could do things, and he admired other people that could do things, and he would really be proud of Mary.
I learned to paint at Arrowmont when I was 13, and 16 years later I'm teaching actually the same class that I took. This is actually one of the first oil paintings I ever did. I did this in Ed Locke's class, my first class at Arrowmont when I was 13. It's really encouraging, and it still has survived because I gave it to my mother. You immerse yourself completely in an environment that is supported by people there for the same reason. They're there to learn new skills, invest in a community that is, interested in the same things, like making things, using their hands, you're there in the morning, you want to stay all night, you know, even after like hours, you just want to get it done because you're like so many people around you who are new but yet excited and like learning and creating, and it's amazing just putting yourself in that environment, what can happen. There's a certain responsibility Arrowmont has to, you know, preserving this heritage, definitely. Like I'm all about that, and the crafts that go with it, it's the history. But as a younger person, you know, spending time there, like I think to be relevant, it needs to be pushed more in the contemporary sense, if that doesn't sound too cliche, but yeah, I would agree. I think it's a balance that I think hasn't been even addressed until recently. Let's do some performance art, you know, let's make, you know, instruments. I'm Debbie Rule, and I work here in Knoxville at the Fluorescent Gallery studio space. We all graduated from UT, and all of us that share the studio space, so none of us would be here without it. It's not that workshop learning isn't difficult, it's that the learning environment is a little more free. It's a little more open, I think. And you think art school is like super open and stuff, and it is in many ways, but there are still, just like anything else, people have been making art and people have been doing it academically for hundreds of years. And so people come up with, you know, the rights and wrongs of art and making art. If anything, going to a workshop, you workshop with people that have not had a degree in art, and they're just like, well, why can't I do this thing over here on my paper? You know, why can't I have like drippy paint all over? And, you know, my art school side is like, because it's cliche. And I'm like, well, what does that even mean? Cliche is awesome. It means everybody gets it. Like, why not?
I'm a mixed media artist, and I have a background in fine art, not what we call craft, even though I blur the lines between craft and you know, what we call fine art. But I have my master's in painting from Rhode Island School of Design and studied in fine art institutions, and then suddenly just living in the South, I've been very influenced by craft tradition and how I could incorporate being a painter, but then pull from these other areas of interest in craft and design and bring that into my own work to make it more dimensional. You know, I think just being a painter right now isn't very exciting to me, so I want to have influences from textiles and ceramics and, you know, other mediums that I wasn't taught in art school, you know. So I think I just sort of thought, hey, this is kind of cool to go the opposite direction and to see what I can find over there and then bring it back to what I've studied and what my medium.
Over the summer, I took 3 workshops. I took an embroidery class, took a drawing class, which was a huge deal to me, and then also encaustic. So I tried to do some things that I was already comfortable with, and then also something I had never done before. That was really cool to be part of that as well. Especially, I guess, in embroidery, that it's such a like time-consuming thing, and you really have the time to think about what you're making, and I don't know, it was exciting to definitely do that. And then I came back in the fall and took the paper making and book making workshop, which was awesome and also really challenging. But I mean, it really makes you, the fact that you're not there for an extended amount of time, you have a week, maybe a weekend, a long weekend, and you really want to like get as much out of that as possible, and you work, or I worked probably, yeah, long hours, especially in the paper making and
my drawing workshop. I'd heard of Arrowmont by reputation, you know, before I had a chance to actually come here. And so it had this magical reputation in my mind before I ever came. But when I was at grad school at the University of Florida, I received a scholarship to come and study at Arrowmont through the school. And I took a printmaking class, not a clay class, because I wanted to step outside of my comfort zone and try something I'd never tried before, never trying printmaking. And I came here, and I remembered, we were talking about this morning in class, that if you come to a place like Arrowmont and you step outside of your media, you feel lost without your tribe. And so I always had my eye on what was going on in the clay studio, even though I was with the printmakers. But it was really great. In fact, the experience that I had at Arrowmont during graduate school in printmaking actually fed my ceramics work more than I ever thought it would.
I would encourage people to take a class they maybe wouldn't take. Like if, in my case, like I had, you know, 8 to 10 years of painting and drawing primarily. That's like all I did. So I was like, well, I would like to take something else besides that. And I'm just so glad I made that decision. Like, probably wouldn't have taken baskets for any other reason, you know. It's not like something I would normally do, I guess. But it gives you the opportunity to learn like new skills. It's like skill sharing and like learning these crafts, learning the history of them.
In undergraduate, I focused mainly on photography and painting, but I've definitely evolved from there. Art's always been in my life. I've always drawn and made things, cross-stitched, you know, and embroidered when I was a tiny little kid. That it's always been in my world. And I've realized since graduation and since working in all these different museums and galleries and being exposed to different ideas and artists and what they do, that my, you know, painting and photography is not, I hardly ever do that anymore. I take a lot of photographs, you know, especially on my cell phone. But I've learned that I really love sewing and textile work and dyeing fabric, and especially since moving here, I've learned how to dye with natural products. So I've used goldenrod that was blooming this summer, different oak barks and roots and berries, blackberries that are in my front yard up on the mountaintop.
I know it's easy to live in Knoxville or this surrounding area and not have heard of Arrowmont ever. And then after, you know, having heard of it, it's easy to just let it be and not approach it at all. But I would encourage anybody to just stop in. It's very, very approachable. It's a beautiful little campus next time you're up in Gatlinburg. I was always kind of interested in woodworking. My grandfather's an architect, and you know, I got to hang around with him a little bit and kind of be exposed to some. But I really got my start with a fellow named Wade Richardson up in Townsend, Tennessee. I kind of just wandered into his shop, and he showed me around, and you know, was real honest with me. You know, kind of didn't shy away, didn't shove me out the door. So I offered to come and sweep the floor and just kind of watch him, and did that for about 5 or 6 months. And finally, he decided he had to start paying me after I got out of college. And then I've started taking classes at Arrowmont. That's helped a lot. Even though I consider myself a professional, you know, there's a million different aspects to this line of work that. And by going to take a class from somebody from across the country or across the world, they really expose you to new ways of thinking, and it's not just necessarily hobbies that people are picking up, but it's, you know, it's a way of life. It's how I make my living. The times that I've taken classes up there, it's a pretty broad mix of people, and there's usually maybe a third to a half of the people are from this, at least the East Tennessee area, and the rest are from all over the country.
I know that this place affected my life. I also know that it affected the lives of my children who grew up coming here, coming to openings, seeing their fathers work in exhibitions here at the school, seeing their father as an instructor here.
The teaching experience was really good. It was really fun. I had never taught a class. I had assisted in classes, but it was terrifying. The first couple weeks, I had no idea what I had gotten myself into, I feel like. And of course, time, you know, there's like the little technical things that you don't think about when you're in front of a bunch of kids and they're like looking at you for guidance, and this great experience, and you know, mold my young mind. I don't think they think that, but like essentially that's what you're anticipating them to want from you.
Today, you can go to almost any education journal and read about brain studies that are done, and that children learn to read because they can do art. A child who's good at art is going to want to read about art. A child who is good at sewing is also going to read about sewing. All of it relates together.
There's always 2 or 3 special students that you just know are soaking this up, that are either the history part or the weaving part or both, and they're just into it. They're just into it, and you can't help but be attracted to those students and try to give them more.
Well, I started painting at Arrowmont as a kid, and I just finished up teaching a class, teaching children and at Arrowmont, and it's a huge learning experience. Like, I learned as much, if not more, than the children that I taught. And I think it's a great facility for that, to have, you know, young people my age who like starting off their art career, who are like somewhat regional, to have opportunity to teach, you know, how to manage like X amount of people when it comes to like arts and crafts, you know, like it's an important part of any art education, artist, you know, endeavor.
You are with artists from all over the United States, from other parts of the world, and it's such a wonderful place for exchange of different ideas.
Up at Arrowmont, you know, it's really it's in the middle of Gatlinburg, but you're completely isolated from all of that, especially if you stay for the whole week. And I would recommend anybody try, if you can, stay overnight. You know, eat the meals there. What you get is, you know, the after hours. You know, we usually stay in the shop till midnight, working on whatever you're working with, and talking to people from, you know, from all walks of life, learning how they got into it, and then talking to the instructor, who's probably been a professional doing it for many decades, and the wealth of knowledge that they have.
I think people are surprised to see Arrowmont and be like, oh, like they're doing things, relevant things with relevant artists, not just, you know, the old school. Like it's awesome because Arrowmont is open to both sides of it. There were many workshops and instructors that were the more young, the newer artists, I suppose, that are really relevant to like where we're going with art, I guess, and arts and crafts. And then you still like had the old school guy that was just like, I just want to teach you how to make some salt shakers. And that's okay too, because you're still supporting yourself, you know.
What I really do like about Arrowmont is that if there's like a skill that you want to learn, you know, and you're an artist, and you can read about it in a book or something, but you can come here and get that hands-on experience from a master teacher.
I believe that people are born inherently curious about the world, about their place in the world. And because of that, out of that curiosity becomes a need to identify themselves, to express themselves. Arrowmont gives people a place and the tools to realize that. I would say the most important thing people can do to support Arrowmont is to be a part of Arrowmont. Come here, be a student here, be an instructor here. Come here and go through the gallery. Use this place. Use it as a resource. Use it for enjoyment. Use it for education. And I guess what I would hope is that people internationally, nationally, and locally will think of Arrowmont that way.
Yeah, you are exposed to a lot of the history of Arrowmont, and it's fascinating how it's evolved and changed over the years and influenced, you know, people in this area for 100 years. But it's easy to overemphasize the, you know, the historic aspect of it, because it's not just a has-been, it's an is and it will be.
Someone gets in our way, let's push him over. What do you say? If we had a game to play, we wouldn't be so mean. La 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 la.
They work so hard, and then they do that to create something that is unique, and you know, nobody else would make, you know, make it the way they'd make it. You can. That's also a beautiful thing about it, is you teach, you know, you can teach the certain way of how to draw or the certain way of how to like sculpt something, but nobody's going to make it the way you make it.